there are people coming forward from within the government that are making claims that would suggest that significant progress has been made when it comes to understanding and applying the technology from UFOs. What are your thoughts on that, on the progress?
That is, of course, it's possible. It's hard to imagine that they've made such progress without having crash craft. So those two kind of have to go hand in hand. Um, and if they've made scientific progress on this, then let the rest of the world of science know. This is what scientists do. Scientists share information. We always share information. We share information. We test each other's hypotheses. We reperform each other's experiments. This is how science works. And if you've got government scientists doing this and they're not doing this, they're not scientists. They're something else. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know what they really have found. I've talked to some of those people, and I've and have some ideas, but of course, they're not allowed to talk about it, and for the most part, they don't.
You said you talked to some of those people. Can you elaborate on which kind of companies they
Well,
were working for?
there are some people who are more public. I mean, Erik Davis from the Davis Wilson memo, and so these people have done research on warp drives and things like this, and some of that's been made public from the ATIP program, and so we know some of the things that have been worked on, and there are some of those white papers were made public, and so we have some idea of what progress was made. Can they elaborate? No, and they don't, and that's to be expected. But
You once mentioned in a previous podcast, and please forgive me if I misrepresent something or put something out of context, that disclosing UFOs wouldn't be too disruptive. So you speculated that they might be hiding something bigger. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that might be?
yeah, I think well, there's many aspects of this that are possible. One, I've already mentioned the abduction phenomenon. If that really happens, and they are performing experiments with people, some of the suggested activities seem to include breeding humans. They take eggs and sperm from people, and they have give them babies to hold. All sorts of very strange stories. And if that's actually happening, that is disconcerting and certainly would be terrifying to learn about in 1947, and still might be terrifying depending on what's going on. So I think that's a real possibility that they're hiding something that is more worrisome than just aliens present on Earth or extraterrestrials, or I mean somebody else present on Earth, whoever they are, non-humans. Could there be, if any of the paranormal effects turn out to be real, that could be very worrisome in some cases. If if we go back to, I mean, I'm just going to use Roswell as an example. I mean, if that was really a disk crash and disk recovery, their response was hyperbolic. Whatever happened in Roswell, the military's response was hyperbolic. That's not debatable. They overreact. They reacted very severely. They detained the sheriff for days. The sheriff was detained and questioned for days. What right does the military have to just show up and detain a sheriff? That doesn't happen in America, and it did in Roswell. So something scared them badly, badly enough to do things that are un-American and illegal. There were illegal activities done by by the military in taking people, threatening their lives if they talk, all of these things. If any of that happened, which there's plenty of evidence that it did, that's illegal and that's a problem. We've also heard that Roswell was Project Mogul. We have evidence that it wasn't, and there's no way it could have been. And when you look at the logs of the the principal investigator who was at NYU who ran Project Mogul, you look at his logs, they did not have a balloon launch that month. So there's no way it was one of those balloons. And if you were going to have the Pentagon tell us that it was a governmental project, I want to see evidence of this. Where's the requisition for all the troops that were sent to Roswell? What were they sent there for? Where are those papers? Present that paperwork. Show us what they were there for. Of course, they don't do that, which is suspicious. And the Pentagon and the Air Force has been telling us story after story for 80 years about what happened at Roswell. The first story, of course, was the one that they put in the newspaper, that the Army Air Force put in the newspaper, saying that they captured a disc. That was the first story. The next story was the next day. That story was quashed, and it was a weather balloon, and that was the next day. And then 1992, the Air Force says that they were testing Mars landers, and the back shell, the saucer-shaped back shell of the lander was mistaken for a disk. Well, wait a minute. Who's testing Mars landers in 1947, 10 years before we had a satellite? 10 years before we knew we could travel in space, they were testing Mars landers? That's BS. Again, lied to. So I want to see evidence. Where's the paperwork for that lander? Present it. So I want to see evidence on both sides. Anybody making any claims about what the government has or has done with UFOs, there is evidence. Present it. Let's be honest about this for once. And were the militaries really that worried about Project Mogul? Really? Are you kidding me? Do you know what Project Mogul was? They were trying to figure out what altitude it would be best to try to record sound waves coming from a nuclear blast. And they were trying to figure out how to keep a hot air balloon hovering at a certain altitude. What happens with a hot air balloon, you put hot air in it, it goes up and expands and goes up faster and faster and faster and expands and it blows up and the thing falls. And they couldn't maintain altitude. And Project Mogul was designed to try to hold balloons at about 50,000 feet. That's all Project Mogul was. That's it. You're going to detain a sheriff for 5 days for that? No. There's something else happened at Roswell. And I don't want to just make this about Roswell. I think the whole thing is, I think something about this has scared somebody badly. And that in some way has led to this kind of secrecy. Could it be just the level of technology that they encountered? It could be. Having the technology that allows you to get from one side of the planet to the other in a minute would be devastating in the hands of anyone on this planet. I mean, looking at our destructive capabilities and desires. And UFOs travel that fast. You can get from here to London in 10 minutes. You can't prepare for a nuclear attack in that period of time. You wouldn't detect the craft fast enough. So now you can't even prepare to retaliate for a nuclear attack. So that changes the whole game. Could that be enough to scare them? It could. That's possible. You don't want anybody else having this technology. We very quickly take our technologies and make them destructive. And if they encountered some pretty amazing technology that would be a problem for us, we humans couldn't handle it. And that could be enough to scare them as well. So I think there's many things that somebody could have been scared about. And I think that that's probably what happened. Something really worried someone in power, and they hushed this up quickly and harshly.